Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today at the Noble Conference. My name's Nathan Calley. I'm head of healthcare investment banking at Noble, and we're happy to have CEO of Anavex Life Sciences, Christopher Missling. They have a very exciting company in the neurospace that is targeting a number of different indications and have had some promising data, and we're excited to hear more about the company today. So we'll turn the call over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm really triggered and intrigued to be here. Thanks for the kind invitation. We are a public company, so I'd like you to read this. So what I'd like to share with you is that our advancement and dedication to pushing the boundaries of scientific discovery with novel orally available small molecules, which are tailored to potentially offer hope and relief to patients. We are focusing, among others, in Alzheimer's disease and other indications of CNS disorders, but Alzheimer's disease really is the highest unmet need these days, with exponentially growing numbers of patients around the world. And just recently, the Alzheimer Foundation Association has updated the numbers in the US alone from 6.7 million currently with Alzheimer's disease to 6.9 million. So it's really increasing further and further, and there's no treatment really available these days which addresses this unmet need. We are now, as an introduction, a regulatory submission stage CNS company focusing on precision medicine with addressing novel central nervous system mechanism. We have and have been in the process of meeting regulatory bodies around the world. We started with the European regulatory body, since the majority of our trial, the latest trial with Alzheimer's disease, was done in Europe. And we got a very favorable feedback and request to move forward with a full submission, which is underway in Europe. We are planning to do the same discussion with the FDA in the US and in Asia with the regulatory bodies in Asian countries as well. Since we have, and we believe, very strong data coupled with important biomarkers of relevance. From a financial perspective, I'd like to share with you that we have enough cash right now for the next foreseeable 4 years, and that is including all the programs we're running, including several trials which we are starting this year and continuing, but also we don't have any cash on the balance sheet. So overall, a very lean and efficient financial responsible management style. Our oral drug blarcamesine, also called Anavex 2-73, has demonstrated in Alzheimer's disease superior data, both in efficacy as well in safety, and especially in the most advanced or recently touted advanced molecules, which are antibodies for Alzheimer's disease, among them the recently approved Leqembi and the not yet approved monoclonal antibody donanemab. However, they come at a cost, which is a high safety risk with a black box warning, and we have shown stopping or slowing of the degeneration in the early Alzheimer's disease, which these compounds have not yet demonstrated. And again, with an orally once daily convenient scalable treatment option, we also are enjoying strong wide international patent protection. The focus on the orally availability is really important because that's what the preference is with patients and families to be treated with. You know that yourself, you prefer to have an oral tablet for painkiller or any other form of medication rather than a complex administration, which requires visit to the doctor several times or safety assessment like the antibodies need. So we have also separated the formulation between our Alzheimer's disease and neurodegenerative indications and compared to the advanced studies in neurodevelopmental disorders, including Rett syndrome and other disorders which we're planning to move ahead, including Fragile X and also potentially infantile spasm and Angelman syndrome, which are high unmet need rare diseases as well. We also are very proud to be able to confirm that the study with Anavex 3-71 is nicely underway with schizophrenia and is recruiting patients so far very nicely. Again, also with an orally available drug, Anavex 371. I'd like to share a little bit about the mechanism, which is a very different mechanism than most CNS drugs, which are targeting downstream or mirroring only limited to one pathway. We have a more comprehensive approach upstream, activating the body-owned defense mechanism, which is the sigma-1. The sigma-1 protein is like a fire truck in your body. If you never need a fire truck because you have no fire in your house, then you will never need a sigma-1 activation. But if you have a severe fire or also water in the basement or other features where you need a fire truck, you need the fire truck immediately. And the good news is that the sigma-1 is functioning as such. However, it needs to be activated with endogenous small molecules. But if you have a chronic fire, like a chronic dysfunction, chronic disease, you need constantly these activators and eventually will be depleted. And the good news is that sigma-1 activation can also happen with small molecules from the outside because it's a GC-coupled receptor. And that's what we're providing to the body. So we're basically replicating, taking advantage of the body-owned mechanism to push back on the pathology of Alzheimer's disease, but also Parkinson and rare diseases like Rett syndrome, to push back to this chronic manifestation of cellular stress from the upstream. And we've shown that very efficiently also with a biomarker of response, which is the sigma-1 expression itself. And we look at the biomarker expression of sigma-1 in the blood, you see that it's very nicely increasing with our drug in the active arm in patients, but in the placebo, it does not. And interesting enough, when you look at the outcome of a patient in a study, these outcome measures in 3 independent indications, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson, and Rett syndrome, we've seen a correlation of the sigma-1 expression with the outcome of the patient. So very nice to see that very high correlation. And the data you see on this page is exactly the correlation values of the expression level with the outcome. So nice to have this confirmed biomarker of response. I'd like to share with you the upcoming data readouts and data updates. And I think the most important one among them today, this year, is the update on the full data of the Alzheimer's study. We have not yet even scratched the surface of the data we have shared so far by showing the really intriguing study which we performed with Anavex 273 in the Alzheimer phase 2/3 study, which includes also several biomarkers, behavioral measures, sleep measures as well, and also whole genome exome analysis. All of this is very data rich, and we like to at least put the most important items into a representable paper, peer-reviewed paper, and this is forthcoming as we see ahead of us. We also want to mention that we got to the first stages of the regulatory submission stage with the European EMA, when we got the approval to move into a centralized procedure, and we will now submit. We're in the process of writing all the modules which are required, which are millions of pages. And once we have them all together, we will be able to submit the entire package to the EMA. We will expect to plan to do that the same with other regulatory bodies. We also expect to have an initiation of several studies, among them the Parkinson study, a phase 2b/3 study. And there was recently an announcement today from another company with a successful outcome in Parkinson's disease. And it's really interesting to see that the unmet need of Parkinson is still there, as well as other indications like schizophrenia, where we also have a compound initiated with 371, which is similar to a company which has a similar mechanism like ours with an M1 agonist. And that company was acquired recently by Bristol Myers Squibb for $12 billion. And the other company, which just recently released Parkinson data, was acquired by AbbVie for $8 billion. So the market is really interesting and in need for CNS drugs, which are novel and administrative easy to administer. We also plan to start another study in a rare disease called Fragile X, and a new study in a new rare disease, which we will announce when we start the study, a phase 2/3 study. And we are very excited also to update you on additional publications. And last but not least, I want to mention that all our drugs have demonstrated not only therapeutic effect, but also ability to prevent pathologies of, for example, Alzheimer. We've seen that both with 273 as well as with 371, the ability to prevent the onset. If an animal was injected with a beta, they never developed the pathologies of Alzheimer when they were treated before with our drugs, respectively. So there's a potential larger market ahead of us. Overall, I want to give you an overview of the portfolio of the company. And we're very excited to see also that the blue line in schizophrenia will be updated now into a dark blue line, because we started recently the schizophrenia trial with Anavex 371. We have now done several trials in Alzheimer's disease. Among them a phase 2 study with 273 and a phase 2/3. And we're now in phase 4 with an open label study of 96 weeks and an ongoing regulatory EMA submission. And you will see updates following from today's update. We're also planning to move forward with 371 eventually in an Alzheimer's study, if the schizophrenia trial, depending on the schizophrenia trial outcome. In Parkinson's disease, we are very excited that we had a very strong Parkinson's disease dementia trial. And we're also excited to start, for that reason, a funded study by Michael Fox Foundation, who also funded the entire preclinical study. So we are able to confirm the effect of Parkinson's disease with Anavex 273 to begin with. And we're also moving forward with a phase 2/3 study in Parkinson this year. So stay tuned for an update. For Rett syndrome, we're excited to do 3 trials, 2 in adults, 1 in pediatric patients. The 2 adult studies were successful in their overall outcome. The blarcamesine pediatric study did not meet fully the primary endpoint, but we are now moving forward with planning a study which will have a stronger power, and we'll have the lessons learned from this study to make this study successful. And we will be discussing this also with the experts in the community, and we have a time already set to talk to the experts and investigators about the upcoming study, how to proceed. But at the same time, I want to also give you a feedback, which is not often provided, from real-world evidence from patients in the last study, in the patient study with pediatric patients, who really saw significant benefit from the study administration of blarcamesine. That includes mobility, and we heard a noise from our family room. Next, we looked, Madeleine, which basically is motor impaired, had climbed 12 steps upstairs to a bedroom by herself. So that has never happened before. And also within a week of starting Anavex drug, the open label extension, she had only 1 seizure, and then she went 3 months without a seizure. So as you know, Rett syndrome also has seizure as a pathology. And the majority of patients, over 90%, accepted the offer from us to move after the open label extension to go into a compassionate use. And that shows really the interest and the benefit of the patient from a benefit as well as safety perspective. Otherwise, they would not voluntarily do that. We like now to move to the Alzheimer's study. The Alzheimer's study is really the most advanced study, and I'd like to share with you an important update in that regard. In this early Alzheimer's disease group of patients, it's very important, early Alzheimer was the target group of our patients. We had co-primary endpoint, ADAS-Cog and ADCS-ADL. We met both co-primary endpoints with a measure. However, when we learned that the appropriate methodology is the MMRM methodology, we noticed that the ADAS-Cog was highly significant. And we noticed that also the CDR sum of the boxes was highly significant. But also the biomarkers, which are relevant in this pathology, among them the brain atrophy, or the brain volume changes, could be measured by MRI, and the A-beta and other biomarkers with blood biomarkers. And we did that in our study. And interesting enough, as a background, in the pathology of Alzheimer, you see a shrinking of the brain. So the black holes in this brain picture on the right, they are getting bigger and bigger, while the healthy controls, as an example here, are not increasing. So the brain shrinks, the white matter, it's getting smaller, and the holes, the black holes, getting larger. And what we noticed that with our drug, all the brain shrinking was attenuated, was slowed, and sometimes even reversed significantly in almost all regions of the brain. That is in the whole brain, in the gray matter, in the parietal lobe, in the frontal lobe, and limbic lobe, as well as insular cortex and temporal lobe. So very exciting to see this data. And we're not aware of other Alzheimer drugs having shown similar ability of stopping the neurodegeneration, which clearly is the manifestation of pathology of Alzheimer. In regarding to A-beta, which we also measured, we noticed that, and there's a technical background here, the measurement of A-beta can be done in two ways. One is by A-beta measure of the brain directly with a contrast medium with a PET scan, or indirectly through the blood by measuring the plasma is in the blood, A-beta 42/40 ratio. And the message of this slide is that they are consistent with each other. So whatever method you use, the PET scan is more expensive, invasive, less convenient for patients. The blood analysis is convenient and not invasive as much. And when you look at this data, you see a significant separation from placebo. Placebo is the grade chart, and it's clinically worsening. It's slightly doing that. And the blarcamesine arm is increasing. So it's reduction of A-beta 42 in the brain equates with an increase of the plasma A-beta 42 ratio. Again, it's counterintuitive, but that's how it is measured. And we put here in comparison, just for visualization, a publication from lecanemab, which shows the same measure of A-beta 42/40 ratio. And you see that they also are showing a similar trend, but their magnitude is slightly smaller than our separation of the ratio. Now something quite important, I'd like to focus on this today, is a new guidance came out from the FDA last month, fresh from the press. And to our excitement, it states that in early Alzheimer, because of the pathology is not as advanced in early Alzheimer regarding function of the patient's activities of daily living, which is function, the requirement is being removed for the requirement for approval. So only a required endpoint, primary endpoint, to be successful or positive for submission would be the cognitive measure. And since we have a clear positive signal of the primary endpoint of ADAS-Cog 13 in our study, we clearly are squarely fitting the new guidance requirement of a primary endpoint with cognition only being successful for a trial. And this new issued guidance allows us now to use this pathway of discussion with the agency to move forward. And we're very encouraged by this new development. And stay tuned, and you will hear more from that. So again, to give you the data background, we successfully reached positive primary endpoint of ADAS-Cog 13 with minus 1.783 and a p-value less than 0.5. We also were successful and have significance in the CDR sum of the boxes with a nice low p-value, and also the p-values of A-beta and MRI. I mentioned that before. And overall, the next steps are we initiated the submission with blarcamesine with the EMA. I mentioned that. And we're starting now also to explore possible commercial activities and examining innovative strategies to effectively communicate and with physicians and patients and payers accordingly. And also, I want to point out that the study is continuing in open label, but it's not needed for approval. But it's nice to have additional safety study data, which is relevant for the overall safety package. And we continue this open label study and Alzheimer's disease phase 2/3 study. And this is called attention AD. And again, we will share the entire data of the study, the placebo-controlled study, in an upcoming paper. Quickly, to be also able to compare our data to other compounds, especially the antibodies, which are now relevant because they're using the same endpoints. Donanemab also measured ADAS-Cog, but their measure separation was much weaker than their separation was minus 1.35, so not very strong separation from placebo. Our separation was much stronger, minus 1.783, and in a shorter period of time, and without the complexity of administration, which is an injectable, with the PET scans, and with the MRI for safety, which this drug will require, even if it gets to the market every 3 weeks. We don't have any of these logistical challenges, problems. And the same applies to Leqembi, which also, where we reached the endpoint in a much earlier stage than Leqembi did for the CDR sum of the boxes. Again, black box warning for Leqembi. We don't expect that. We have no ARIA, and they will have to be, the patients have to do a MRI every 2 weeks. And from what we hear, the drug is not very well received. Apparently, there are not many patients on the drug, and seems to be difficult for them to stay on drug. We also, I mentioned, are moving forward with commercial activities, planning commercial activities and strategies, which we like to use innovative strategy to discuss and engage with patients and share with them this novel drug potential, which is, of course, of interest given the now unmet need and the clear logistical challenges of the antibodies not being well received in the marketplace for all the reasons we just mentioned. The overall market is really increasing. Just recently, the Alzheimer Association increased the number of Alzheimer patients in the US alone. It used to be 6.7 million, it's now 6.9 million. So it increases, year by year. And in Europe, it's 7.8 million Alzheimer patients, and in Asia, 23 million. So you can see really like a huge unmet need, and Parkinson is similar. It's a smaller number of patients, but still an unmet need, similar also size in schizophrenia and the other rare diseases. We have good patent protection, wide international patent protection up to 2039. And we also have, from a financial point of view, a very conservative cash utilization rate. We used 27.8 million last year, fiscal last year, and we have run about 140 million cash on the balance sheet and no debt on the balance sheet. So we can clearly expect to have enough cash for the foreseeable future. But right now we're expecting to have cash, including all the activities I mentioned, for around about 4 years. And that's thankful also to non-dilutive funding, which we received from Michael Fox Foundation, which we're very grateful for, as well as the International Rett Foundation. I'd like to also point out that all this work would not happen without a great team. And I'd like to especially point out the great added value our statistician, Kun Jin, has provided to us so far, who came directly from the FDA with his invaluable knowledge about the regulatory procedures and requirements in that regard in the division of the FDA. Also, we have a strong team from a scientific advisory board with a very strong chairman, Marwan Sabag, and great team members, which are synergistically helping us in endeavors of our indications of Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and rare diseases as well. So this is really the summary of our activities. We're using a precision medicine platform to address novel central nervous system targets to improve the therapeutic effect. We have several promising differentiated therapeutic challenging CNS diseases with unmet need, using a novel approach, an upstream approach, which is really the analogy of immunostimulation oncology, if you like, a certain analogy where the cancer field changed from blocking the cancer to activating the body to help himself. And we achieved multiple milestones, and we like to move forward and focus now on bringing these therapeutic um, um, compounds to market around the globe. We believe we're really good position for future expansion and worldwide commercial rights, which we own entirely, and we also have a strong IP for our oral administered drugs, which is really the unmet need and the demand. And again, we have enough cash for the foreseeable future for at least 4 years right now, and no debt on our balance sheet. And with that, I'd like to close out and say the Anavex inherent advantage is really the scalability and the equitable and accessible for diverse population, because it's a small molecule, can be shipped with Amazon everywhere, and maintaining a sustainability within the global healthcare system, which is not limited to one country, but it's a global challenge overall. If you'd like to learn more, please go to our website, www.anavex.com, and stay in touch with us. We will look forward to update you.
Thanks, Christopher. Great presentation. We have a lot of questions coming in. I don't think we're going to get to all of them. But just for a few questions that we have time for, and if we don't have time to answer your questions, we're happy to help set up a call with Christopher if needed. So for your sigma-1 receptor application for a therapeutic and a possible preventative, how broad are the applications for that?
It's really broad because we really have not yet found even the ability to say that we exhausted the indication spectrum. We have really noticed that there's so many other indications where we also have indeed find in the publication, in the general domain, public domain, but also in our experiments, indications which are not yet been discussed. And we really have noticed that the sigma-1 really seems to be a very upstream approach to reduce cellular stress, and it's not limited to the indications which we have now targeted in the clinic so far, and even the ones which we have mentioned in our summary slides. So there are many more indications where the sigma-1 activation is beneficial. So I think this is really scientifically interesting and probably has the ability to become a GLP-1 type feature because of its really ability to very upstream address the pathology in multiple features.
As a follow-up to that, so, with all of the positive data that you've achieved so far in this company, what's the importance of halting or delaying the brain shrinking in Alzheimer's disease? How would you explain that?
That's really intriguing because the brain shrinking really takes place. Alois Alzheimer already found that over 100 years ago with his first patient, that the brain was smaller compared to other patients or healthy patients, healthy people. And this is really a key pathology, and it's intuitive, right? A brain which is shrinking cannot get better, and it clearly loses power or potential. So the fact that we're able to stop this shrinking is clearly a manifestation of disease modification. And we're very excited to see this now, the data of the full data in the paper or in a presentation, however it will come first, to be more mentioned. So that's really clearly the goal of looking at that, because it's so important to be aware that the shrinking of the brain, it's been a little bit under discussed in other compounds because they didn't show that effect. But that doesn't mean that it's important, the opposite. It's the clearly most obvious observation of a pathology that the brain shrinks, you have less memory.
Okay. I have a question on the tau biomarker. Any information on tau and any indication how that fared in the blarcamesine dosed Alzheimer patients?
Yep. We also saw a signal in tau and also inflammation in our study, and all the details will be shared in the upcoming paper. So it's a good question. Yeah, we saw consistency across other biomarkers as well.
When is that paper?
The paper is expected to be published this year. The paper procedure is a bit complex. We've seen papers being submitted a year ago, and then you don't see that a year later. So it's really a question which we have no control in, but we expect this year. So stay tuned.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Can you clarify, was ADSC ADL met with MMRM?
Yes. So we did not meet with MMRM. That's why its functional endpoint, it was trending in the right direction, but was not totally significant by itself. But the primary endpoint was met with the respond analysis, which we did. But with the MMRM, the ADAS-Cog, the primary endpoint ADAS-Cog was clearly significant. And again, with the new guidance now, that is sufficient for an approvable submission.
Excellent. That's all the time we have. Thank you very much for everybody that joined, and thank you, Christopher, for the presentation and being part of the Noble Conference.
Thank you again.
Okay. Bye now.